Okay. Let's introduce Alicia to the podium. Please give her an initial round of applause. And thanks to Mr. Brahm and Mr. Kim for serving as her panelists today. Alicia's topic is kind of interesting. And the funny thing is, when I first set up the schedule for Thesis, I had her as last, the very last one today, last of the whole thing. And Alicia wisely said to me, do you really think the last thing we want on everybody's minds is laxatives? So I moved her up one spot. But it is a really good topic and something that is a concern, right? Especially among our sort of adolescents and teenagers who want to look like the models they see on TV. Anyway, great topic. She's done a great job putting it together. Here are her words. She says, I would like to thank God for helping me throughout this process and thank him for giving me supportive people around me. Specifically, I would like to thank Mr. Wade, who has been very helpful and patient in helping me throughout this thesis. My advisor, Dr. Tia, who's been very supportive and informative in helping me build my case. And I also would like to thank the fellow teachers and beloved friends who have helped me in organizing my speech and helping me prepare for my presentation, and my family for always supporting me. And maybe the best, that's my words. I can hardly read my screen. But I was going to say, so I was about to read my own words, which is maybe the best title of the year. Maybe the best title.
Thank you.
If we gave out or maybe the worst, depending on your viewpoint. Her title is Let It Go, Can't Hold It Back Anymore, Restricting Laxative Commerce to Stop Laxative Abuse. Please welcome Alicia one more time as I get the timer set up. All right, I'm going to get the timer going. You can start whenever you want.
Greetings. My name is Alicia and I'm 17 years old. A 17-year-old that lives in a world that tells me I should be skinny. And I'm sure I'm not the only one here. I see celebrities, pop stars, K-pop idols, all worshiping the ideal of standard beauty, which is to be slim. And of course, as a young, naive teen, I must keep up. So I started to pay attention on the things that I was consuming in my body, asking for less sugar in my drinks, taking less rice during lunchtime, and even skipping dinner when necessary. But all this suffering, for what cause? To be skinny, of course. If only there was such a thing in this world that would allow me to never gain weight. I scoured the internet, and finally, I found it. My golden solution, laxatives. I go to my nearest Walmart, buy a pack of laxatives, and start to consume them daily. And as the days went by, I felt amazing seeing the numbers go down on my scale just like that. 1, 2, 5 kilograms. It was like a dream come true. Until it wasn't. After 2 weeks of daily consumption, I felt a retching pain in my stomach. I began to go to the restroom days and nights endlessly. My face became pale. I felt tired all the time, fatigued. And simply, I felt helpless. The severity became so bad that I was taken to the ER. And after a checkup from the doctor, they told me, you have extreme electrolyte imbalance and your bowel is irregular. I was then given an IV and ended up in the hospital just because of 2 lines I read from the internet 2 weeks ago. As I laid there reflecting on that hard hospital bed, I thought to myself, was it worth it? If such a small medication is severely impactful, should they really be sold everywhere? And if such a potent drug exists, surely more restrictions should be present. Individuals have engaged in extreme weight loss diets across history. Historical ways of weight loss management included everything from purging food in ancient Greece, consuming arsenic pills in the 19th century, to even consuming tapeworms in the 20th century West. Even up until today, where we live in a more educated society, extreme weight loss diets are still greeted with much enthusiasm and continue to prevail its influence on people. Nowadays, people would purposefully starve themselves, go on water diets, and even consume chemically abundant hormone-altering medication in order to achieve their dream physiques. In shelves, we see all sorts of products, ranging from sugar-free snacks, diet drinks, weight loss shakes, and the list goes on. But society has no longer limited its diet products to only foods and beverages. Now, society has introduced medication in order to help people lose weight. Drugs like Ozempic, Ali, and laxatives act as a beacon of hope for people to attain their dream ideal bodies. And with the help of social media virality, laxatives have been the drug most consumed for its so-called speedy weight loss. Feeling a little bloated? Take a laxative and you'll be all right. Overate on McDonald's earlier and feel a little bit guilty about it? Take a laxative and you'll be all right. This is a misconception. Laxatives are not dietary supplements. According to definition, laxatives are drugs used to induce bowel movements to reduce constipation. Whereas dietary supplements, they are simply added nutrition sources for those who are nutrition deficient. Laxatives add missing ingredients to your body. Whereas laxatives, under wrong consumption, they destroy everything. Retail stores and pharmacists categorize laxatives as over-the-counter drugs or OTC medication, which are simply drugs sold without prescription. Think of Panadol or Milanta, for example. Anyone can buy these drugs freely without any worry. And the FDA categorizes these drugs as safe for unmonitored usage. However, safe does not mean that they should be used frequently. When laxatives are taken in too frequent of a manner, it can lead to addiction in the same way that more potent drugs like narcotics can. Addiction in the sense that your body will not be able to function once you do not continuously consume these drugs. And even with the knowledge of the abuse in society and how it is prevalent, especially in the young generations, governments and healthcare facilities have seemingly not done a thing to touch upon the issue. And given this urgency, governments and healthcare authorities should limit the commerce of laxative drugs to pharmaceutical and medically licensed counters alike for three main reasons. The first, it ensures healthier patients. The second, it increases the effectivity of public health agents. And the third, it allows more adequate education on the topic of laxatives in society. The lack of legitimate health authority oversight has posed a problem in the commerce of OTC laxative drugs, namely on self-medication. The first reason to support this restriction is that a restriction would enable better health for the patient. This is firstly because it impedes people from facing complications due to unmonitored usage. Currently, much misuse and abuse is rooted from a very small problem. Medical labels are simply difficult to understand and often goes neglected, resulting in people subconsciously abusing medication and facing complications as consequence. Complications ranges from everything from electrolyte imbalance, dehydration, to even organ failure. Through having drugs restricted, such as laxatives, it would allow more proper oversight for these drugs, as pharmacists can reject the commerce of it. In addition, it also enables pharmacists and medical authorities alike to ensure people's health on both mental and physical levels. This is because pharmacists can help people realize what they are really going through. For example, if someone comes in with complaints of constant constipation, pharmacists may help people realize that their problem is not just mere surface level stomach ache and can refer them to a doctor in timely manner. At the same time, it can also stop people with mental issues such as eating disorders from consuming laxative drugs, as this restriction stops them from the non-confrontational way of buying OTC laxative medication to feed into their skinny obsession. Above all this, it also reduces the chances of dependency. Laxatives have been in the market for too long of a time. And this means that anyone, even those without stomach problems, can buy laxatives in their nearest Alphamart or Indomart. And this causes a problem because when you consume laxative drugs, chemicals in the drugs stimulate your body. And over time, this stimulation can lead to nerve damage and makes your colon lazy to function appropriately when needed, resulting in amplified constipation where you would have to rely on higher and higher dosages of laxative drugs, from 1 to 5 to 10 to even 50, and to a point where all your bodily functions go down the drain. This must be prevented, and hence restrictions should be mandated. In addition to having healthier patients, it also ensures that governmental healthcare agents can function more effectively, hence serving the public better. Now the question is, how? This is firstly because it allows more systematic ways to monitor. As touched upon earlier, when pharmacists are put inside this equation of restrictions, they can reject the commerce of laxative drugs for those who do not need them. And this allows them to do their jobs appropriately, which is to protect medication and ensure its proper usage in society. Next, this also prevents risk of stockpiling, which later on translates to national drug shortages. When health institutions increase the difficulty of obtaining medication, people are discouraged from consuming these medications on a non-urgent basis. And at the same time, this allows the government to more adequately circulate all the drugs in society, which allows people who actually really need laxative medication to be able to get them in time. Subsequently, the government can also enhance medical care. Medications are chemicals, and all drugs have side effects. Too many drugs can spoil your body's homeostasis, and for that reason, some drugs just need additional supervision, namely in this case for laxatives. Over-ingesting laxatives can lead to a counterproductive cycle of more hospital visits, further complications, and a decrease in patients' quality of life. This cycle must be prevented, and hence restriction enables those to accurately get needed medication to target their specific problems and ensure that seemingly small problems like constipation are not completely pushed under the rug. Now, to the last. Restricting laxatives enables the government to comprehensively educate people on the topic of laxatives and products alike. Firstly, the government plays a role in educating people. And if the government does not employ scientific understanding to combat the hoaxes of social media, then we are all doomed to fail. People need the government to take action for change to happen. And governmental issued subjects are just reacted with a sense of more urgency. Restriction reduces delusion. The delusion that people can take medication lightly, and hence this increases awareness. At the same time, it can also combat hoaxes, misinformation, and false marketing that circulates through social media. For the case of laxatives, misinformation has been widespread on social media platforms such as Instagram and TikTok, where social media influencers highlighted laxatives as budget Ozempic. Ozempic, a diabetic medication known for its weight loss side effects. Now imagine a bunch of teenagers rushing to stores in order to buy laxatives. It would be an absolute nightmare for people who actually need this medication and also an inevitable suffering for these youngsters as they take the medication improperly due to being misinformed. Having laxative restrictions allows this thing from not ever happening in the first place. And this, it falls on the government to make sure that people are protected from themselves. Lastly, on a more global scope, when prevention is put into action, it can allow people to be educated about medications holistically for all drugs, not just laxatives, as the system promotes a passive education cycle. Knowledge is power. And as of today, the government has failed to adequately provide its civilians with medical literacy. And due to that, so many medications are abused for all drugs, not just laxatives. So surely, but surely, the government has to take first steps into combating disinformation. The government can use laxative restriction as the first step to resolve ongoing healthcare issues within the nation, hence achieving a healthier society, which is the goal that we are all rooting for. Now, to the refutations. Some people object this restriction because they say that it poses a threat for people who need them for emergency cases. For example, young kids who might need them in emergencies, or even people who already regulate their terminal illness, such as irritable bowel syndrome. While it is true that traditionally, laxative commerce are indeed for rapid relief or emergency cases. But we have come to a point in society where having a drug sold readily does not equate to quick access for those who need them. Across the United States, laxative shortages have been ongoing due to misinformation in social media. And it went to a point where drug companies are even considering to open up new factories to uphold this demand. Hence, this causes a problem where people who actually need these medications are not able to buy them simply because they are not in stock. Hence, what is the point of selling a drug so readily if no one can purchase them within the necessary times? If our goal is to ensure that people who need these drugs will be able to buy them when necessary, having a laxative restrictions to pharmacists and medically licensed counters alike is more than reasonable to do so. Secondly, some people also might complain that it is not feasible because simply pharmacists are not everywhere. Justifiable because a lot of developing countries have very limited healthcare resources. However, in retrospect, this is not such a big problem. Even in Indonesia, where I think we can all agree medical care is far from perfect. It is widespread enough in the country as even smaller and more rural villages have puskesmas or pusat kesehatan masyarakat, where people can seek immediate and affordable medical care. Given that laxatives are simple drugs when taken singularly, monitoring such drug would not be such big of an issue even with people that do not have a doctoral degree. Hence, it should be done. Throughout this thesis, we have discussed on all the reasons why there should be an implementation of laxatives restriction. From personal medical reasons that enhances patients' health to a broader scope of more ideal health in the country as it allows more effectivity for public healthcare agents and ultimately achieving a more educated nation. We saw the potential of increasing patients' care through the collaborations of pharmacists, the government, and patients, which enhances the education in society and not only protects the future of our youth, but also all the generations before them, falling into the conclusion that to maintain a better health status quo, laxatives should be restricted. As I say these theses today, I will continue to see all those ads. I will continue to see people that I love around me being misinformed and using laxatives in a not so proper manner. And I am sure that you all here will see the same. So, in addition to supporting the government to implement such laws, let us also start from ourselves. Let's be more cautious about our medical consumption and more concerned about our medical needs. And instead of a quick solution to plaster our problems, let's opt for a more long-term, sustainable resource of healthcare. Let's put our health above all. Thank you.
Great job, Alicia. Let's get started with the Q&A. All right, let me start with Mr. Kim first.
Hello, Alicia. How are
Hi,
you?
Sir. I'm
Listen.
fine now.
Okay, you're fine now. Okay, you know what's gonna happen next, right? But before that, I wanna ask you, do you remember 3 years ago, you, Petra, and maybe Darren or Casey defeat me in debate? You don't?
No.
Because I never forget that. The reason being, I remember when you were struggling to speak for 7 minutes despite having a text. And now here you are, pulling up what I would say one of the best speeches I've ever heard throughout
Thank you,
this
sir.
thesis. So you should be proud of yourself because I'm very proud of you. Thank you, Mr. Wade. You've done a tremendous job. So, Alicia, I just need to hear you once to become very, very hooked in your topic. And I have 4 questions in total. This isn't meant to, what you said, bantai you or anything, but genuinely, I taught a bunch of 13 years old who can explain to me in details how they can get access to steroids if they wanted to. This is personal for me, and I'm genuinely curious. You brought up laxative. Somehow, I assume this problem affects mostly women. Don't you agree?
I would say that it affects a lot of female audiences, but it's not exclusive to just females because maybe the one that I touched in my speech today is the one's most relevant for us, where I think diet culture also really perpetuates this thing of using laxatives to lose weight. However, it is a fact that laxatives are also used in sports, for example, for people who go on boxing or those kind of combat things where they have to weigh themselves in. And some coaches actually um, says to their students that they should take laxatives because it is indeed a rapid thing to lose like the last extra weight that you might have. So yeah, predominantly mostly a female audience, but not exclusive to the.
Okay. Why do you think this is predominantly to what you said, female audience?
Thank you, Mr. Kim, for your question. And I think this stems a lot from the diet culture. We see all sorts of standards in social media in Hollywood, where even characters that are more loved, let's just say the main characters, are always the skinny blondes, or they're always the ones with amazing figures, whereas the second leads or the ones that don't get the guy is always the ones that maybe lack in their appearance. And sometimes in especially mainstream media, I believe that I see a lot of maybe people with more weight in their body, they're just the funny one. And they're not really shunned upon as someone who can be a main character in their lives. And the thing with social media, the thing with entertainment, is that it wants to entice its audience as best as it can. And so I think this also maybe subconsciously brings an idea in our heads that people are more valued if they have better figures, if they're more pretty, if they dress up better, and so on.
Terrific answers. Second questions. Assume I'm one of those people who abuse laxative, and here you are, you try to convince me that I should not. And I say to you, why do you care what I do with my own body? This is my body, my choice. It doesn't affect you, it affects only me. And if I made it, I'm gonna be accepted, I'm gonna be liked by everyone. So why do you care? Mind your own business. How do you respond to that?
Thank you, Mr. Kim. And I think this thing also stems with our society. We live in a very, I would say, individualistic world where people say, my body, my rights. And this is not only a problem for medication, but also things for later on, like abortion or maybe same sex marriages. And my life is up to me and it's in my hands. But I think as society, we have to also implement a culture of care in which we have to really pay more attention to the people around us. Because as humans, we are also social beings. And you cannot say that I can live in this world by myself, because simply that would be not feasible, as we need other people. And so it's also, I would say to you, Mister, if you actually said that to me, is it's not that I do not want you to be accepted in society, but it's more so that I also want you to have a good life. A lot of people, they see that laxative drugs can give them immediate help. But really, it's just a plaster of a bigger problem. When, for example, I would say that if you said that to me, you would have body image issues. And the thing with using laxatives, it does not solve the issues to the root problem. Even if you were, let's just say, 20 kilograms skinnier, would you still be insecure? That's still a big probable case. In society, even those with, let's just say, 100 pounds figure, which in the standards of Hollywood, New York's modeling industry, it's the ideal way of having your figure. But then, do we actually see the concerns of these people? Are their mental states okay? And even if they're that skinny and that gorgeous and that beautiful on television, does that mean that they lead a good life? Then no. So I think as your student, I would say that it's not because I do not want you to be accepted. It's not that I don't care. And I know that you have your own choices. But as your student also, I care about you genuinely, not because it gives me something, but it also because it's, I would say, also human basic decency. And especially as Christians, we have to learn this culture to be helpful, to be caring about others, and also love one another.
Great. Third questions. I think Mr. Wade and Ms. Denise can say that in the past in America, there was a period where they banned alcohol because of its abuse. What happens? There's a lot of alcohol dark market, an entire organized crime revolving around alcohol. Now, I'm afraid that when your proposal is being carried out, there's an entire new market, illegal market of laxatives that they don't sold in pharmacies, they probably sold it on shady social media or websites. How are you going to at least minimize that risk of dark market that will arise, assuming you have successfully restricted this laxative?
Thank you, Mister. And I think before we talk about any dark market and stuff, we have to also understand why is it abused. Because I would say that things in the dark market, they're usually drugs like narcotics, such as say heroin and all those sort of things, where it's basically illegal in the country. Meanwhile, for laxatives, it's not illegal. I'm not trying to fight for it to not exist in society. Because I would have to agree that laxatives are extremely beneficial for those who actually need them. As maybe your nutrition from the things you eat are just not enough for you to be able to have good bowel movements. And so, how to restrict these things? It's also for the government to adequately educate people on the reasons of why does the government do this restriction. A lot of the times, people are just immediately thinking that, oh, the government is just making my life harder. But in reality, the government plays a law and a role in protecting their civilians, just like how parents would protect their child. And so education is also an important play factor in this thing because as you tell people that this medication is really detrimental to your health, people can also understand that this is for my greater good. And so maybe it would be impossible to completely erase all dark markets. And even countries that are already very outstanding in doing it, like maybe more developed nations like let's just say Switzerland or America or UK, with more resources, they are still not able to combat this problem and eliminate it completely. So I think that it stems with education really and how the government has to really translate to its people to take their attention of their medical needs for themselves.
Good. Last questions. Last questions. You, even you, and well, I accept the fact that suppose there's a dark market, we cannot completely eradicate it. I mean, human is just like a fallen creature. They always find a way to profit from other people's misery. My last question is, assuming you put all this restriction and they're still selling those laxatives that are very, very dangerous, that are completely above the standardized, should we criminalize them? And if we criminalize selling laxative that is sold illegally, should we also criminalize the consumers who consumed it illegally to deter them from doing this?
Thank you, Mister. And I believe that laxatives should not be treated as if it was narcotics. Because even the root cause of why people are abusing it is completely different. And also, the levels of how far of detrimentality it can bring to your health is also different. Narcotics, we can all agree that it's terrible for your body. It can destroy all your organ function, it can destroy all your mental health, your mental state, make you schizophrenic, and the list goes on. Whereas for laxatives, even though the damages are big, it is still at most times reversible. And so I think criminalizing will not actually solve the problem in society of why it's still abused. And if we just target these people and criminalize users for these laxatives, they might also blame the government, well, I'm doing it to achieve society's standards. And does this really make a culture of care that we want in our nation? The answer is no. And for your question in whether or not we should make the sellers criminals, I don't think so, but then there should be sanctions upon it. Maybe criminalizing and putting these people to jail is, I would say, too far of a stretch. And these people usually still sell these things because also of lack of education. Like in Indonesia, medical literacy is very, very, very far beyond the standards of how it should be. And even sellers, they're not necessarily medically literate. So again, it falls to the government to, in addition to having these restrictions, also give people adequate medical literacy so that they can live their lives a better way.
Perfect. Well
Okay,
done.
Mr. Brahm.
Check. Okay, good afternoon, Alice.
Afternoon is there.
So first of all, I think this is the first time when I became the panelist and then I read the paper and then I found some questions, but then when I read further, it looks like you answer all of my questions in your refutatio. So very well done, very spot on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mister.
Okay, so I need to find another questions for sure. So the first question, you mentioned in your paper that in UK they started to put this kind of disclaimer when they sell this laxative products. Okay, so my question for you is, until what limit do we allow or do we let the government restrict the laxative usage, will that be okay? Only to put the disclaimer, like when we sell the cigarettes,
Yeah.
right? So what's your opinion about this?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bram, for your question. And I think this is a very good question because I wouldn't say only in the UK, but really all across the world, every medication has labels. And if you go and read the labels, there are actually information of how these drugs should and should not be used. For example, for the case of laxatives, specifically for the brand Dulcolax, if you read the labels, it will tell you that it can lead to hypokalemia, which is when your body has not enough electrolytes to function. And this reduces your nervous and neuron behaviors. And it can also, it says the restrictions for example, young kids that are below 6, they cannot use them. Pregnant women cannot use them because it can stimulate like early labor and stuff. And so really, if you go and look inside these labels, all the information is present. But the problem is, people don't actually read the labels. And I believe here that 9 times out of 10, when all of us here are buying medications and taking them, as long as we know the name and like, okay, flu medication, you're not reading the instructions, you're just taking popping a pill, drinking water, and problem solved. And so this is the concern as well. Even though, in a way, labels can be very good, it's not effective enough given that the medical literacy in our country is not enough to reach those standards. I would say that even, for example, the average civilian in Indonesia, even if they take the time to read these labels, it does not 100% guarantee that everything they're reading, they're understanding. Because again, these labels are made in a very, I would say, scientific way, where there's a lot of terms, biological terms, that people with low education might not understand, even though the medication is accessible for them. So for the government's restrictions, Indonesia currently has a color code system. If you see all medications that you buy in Alphamart or Indomart or even the pharmacist, there's color blue, green, and red with a K. For the green medications, it's free. So in Indonesia, I'll translate it's bebas. For blue, it's bebas terbatas. And for red, it's only with prescriptions from a doctor. And the thing with it is green medications don't have that big of side effects. So I would say blue Panadol is a green medication and it does not give you anything even if you take it mistakenly. Whereas laxatives, they are highlighted as blue medication, which means that there is more substantial problems that can be brought if you take these medications irregularly. So this is current, and for red is of course, if the doctor gives it to you, the pharmacist will only be able to give it to you if you have the doctor's letter. And how much of the government should restrict these laxatives? I think again, the government has done things in order to allow people to understand medications. I think that the color coded system is a very good way of quickly noticing if a drug is like how on the level on the scale how dangerous it can be. However, again, does everyone here know that we have a color code system? I would say no. And the thing is, again, is what I said to Mr. Kim earlier, is that the medical literacy is not enough to have such restrictions. So the government has to go to extended lengths in order to protect certain medication from being abused.
Okay, well then, thank you, Alice. So, continue with that question. Which one do you think is a better solution? Okay, is that the government limit or restrict the usage of the laxative, or the government focus on the medical literacy that you said, educate people, to be informed more about the side effect of the
Medication.
medication.
Thank you, Mr. for your question. And this question I would maybe rephrase to why not just education? And the reason is, if I may, I want to give an analogy. For example, parents love their children, or most of them do. But then, parents, let's just say on the topic of drugs, like heroin, parents will inform you to, okay, as a kid, don't take heroin, it can destroy your life. A, B, C until Z, right? But if heroin was not restricted in the country, would there still be children who use it? Yes. Because, especially as kids, you would say, oh, that's just mom, you know? And she doesn't know that much. Sorry. Uh, but yeah, so I don't think it's a wise decision if the government just focuses on education, but don't take proactive action into stopping these issues from happening. Because again, it would just be the same thing as telling a child to not do drugs, yet having drugs sold everywhere, even to the convenience store.
Okay, so to continue with that answer, what about these sayings that says, the more it is restricted, the more curious people will be. Like similar like children, right? The more the parents restricted them, don't go there, okay? They become curious, wow, what's inside? So,
Thank you, Mister. And I think for the topic of laxatives, this is very prevalent because laxatives, as maybe what I've discussed earlier, it's very enticing for people. You know, if you hear that there's a miracle medication that can help you lose weight in a snap,
right.
everyone wants to take it. And how to limit the things from when you prevent it, it doesn't go to a bigger problem. Again, it's medical literacy. And I think I would also explain on how the government can implement medical literacy on its civilians. I think also educating them through schools should be important in this topic because everyone from the first grade till the 12th grade, till college, until early work life, or even when you're already old and retired, everyone needs to understand about their health because your body is technically the only thing that you have. And so it is important for the government to implement these kind of, I would say, information sessions, which not only, I would say, talk about specific drugs like laxatives, but also talk about drugs holistically and maybe can be titled in the lines of how to keep yourself healthy. Currently, for Indonesia, we have already a system of isi piringku, which used to be empat sehat lima sempurna that we all might know here. And this is targeted for first grade audiences. However, I think that it can also be extended to a broader range of all age groups because the problem does not apply to just little kids.
So we are really out of time. I have one quick question for you, though. So you've told us about this problem, but is it really a problem? Is there data out there that shows how laxatives are abused?
Thank you, Mr. Wade, for your question. And I would like to present some data that's written on my paper, but I would not have the time to explain it all here. Actually, 56% of people with eating disorders have said that they do take laxatives, or at least preliminarily take laxatives in order to lose weight, because it's a large misconception in society. And for purging anorexia specifically, it's 71.6%. And this is such a big number. And though it might not be seen like the statistics of, let's just say, heart attacks or stroke, because laxatives are sold freely, it's hard for the government to keep track on how much of it is really consumed. Though it is definitely prevalent and a lot of people use it, not just in today's era, but also maybe 20, 30 years from long ago.
Okay, excellent job, Alice. You did a
Thank you,
great
sir.
job. Excellent. Okay, very good. We're down to our last thesis, but first, please, friends and family of Alice, meet at the backdrop for photos.